go when you're ready.
Okay. Let's wait a couple more minutes. Maybe there's a few more that will come, but.
Okay, because it's about to be 9:30,
It's
so
coming
we.
9:30. Okay. Well, I'm all set. So.
There's a handrail there, so.
So I'm okay there. Yeah.
You got a handrail.
I better take this for the other
If
side.
you get tired, you can just lean on the handrail.
And just do that. I'm glad the railing is there. I actually am doing all right and can sometimes even walk without that, but I just didn't want to take a risk. It was silly there. So,
Platform bigger so you don't have to sit there with your heels off of it. Try to balance yourself.
no, this is a very comfortable spot to sit and stand, so everything's okay. Do you give a countdown?
I'll give you a countdown.
Okay, give me a countdown.
Ready? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2,
Stop.
1.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm Reverend Dr. Dikki-Jo Mullen, and this is Sunday Morning Lyceum in Casadega, kind of a Sunday school for all ages. I never thought I'd end up as a Sunday school teacher, but actually I really enjoy it. Well, thinking about our topic for this morning, I thought first of all about the full moons. We have the 4th supermoon in a row coming up this week, and it's going to be on Thursday, August 11th. If everything has felt very emotional and kind of turned up to a higher volume and intense the last few months, it's because the moon has been perigee. That means very close to the earth. And this Thursday, August 11th, is the last supermoon we have to deal with this year. So hold on if everything seems kind of loony, because it also is the week of the Lion's Gate in astrology. How many of you have heard of the Lion's Gate? A few of you have. The Lion's Gate is 8/8 of all year, August the 8th, and its origins go back to the astrology of ancient Egypt. The stars that make up the belt of Orion, the constellation, lining up with the pyramids of Giza, Egypt, the week of August 8th, and it's preceded by Sirius and the rising of the Nile, creates a time of special power. And the Lion's Gate is getting into cosmic or esoteric astrology. And it's supposed to be a time when higher awareness and chances for manifesting things come together. And this will be exact tomorrow. It's a time span that goes from July 26th until about August 12th. But tomorrow, August 8th, is the peak day. And if you think of the figure 8, it looks like the infinity symbol, the cosmic lemniscate, and it's constant motion. It's a very powerful day. The good part about that is what you visualize, what you affirm is likely to have special power and to manifest on a higher level. The negative thing is you have to be careful of any negative thoughts you might be thinking, either about the neighbors you're mad at or whoever, because they have special power during this time period. I'm not a big Bible quoter, but what I have feared hath come upon me would be a good quotation to think of how the negative side of the Lion's Gate could affect all of us. But the full moon and this opportunity is also a good time for any Egyptian studies that you might want to do, because it ties in with that culture, and also with past lives. If you're interested in past life regression or in meditating on your own past life journeys. On the little handout you got when you came in here, or for our online listeners, it's posted on my website, Skymeet and Musings, is a recipe for making Crown of Success powder. And it's very simple to make and very, very effective. All you need is cornstarch, powdered sugar, and essential oil of basil. If you don't have that, you can crush basil leaves, which are easy to grow and get, and let them steep overnight in olive oil, and then strain them and use that. And the directions for using the number 33, which is another spiritual number, to make the Crown of Success powder is there. Give it a try, particularly between now and late tomorrow if you can, but anytime, and you'll be pleasantly surprised at how that helps to manifest the positive in your life. Well, thinking of what you might have enjoyed today for the reading, I thought of a birthday gift that I got of a little free book called Steps Toward Inner Peace, the story of Peace Pilgrim. And I thought, oh, that might be something everybody might enjoy reviewing. Peace Pilgrim was a lady who just one morning walked away from her life and kept on walking. Have you ever thought of doing that? Maybe we all have once in a while, but she really made a success out of it. New Year's Day of 1953, this lady in her 40s appeared at the Rose Bowl game in California wearing a sweatshirt that had Peace Pilgrim stenciled across it, and she was handing out folders saying she was going to keep walking for peace. And we could have gotten away with that in California in 1953 here on the East Coast. She might not have had the good reception that she did, but she left everything behind, and she walked away with just a toothbrush and some note papers and these little handouts and a few pencils, and that was it. What makes somebody do that? And who is that type of a person? Isn't that an interesting thing to think of? I was so fascinated by the whole story that I looked up her horoscope and her biography and found out that her name was Mildred Norman, and she was born in Egg Harbor, New Jersey. And she grew up in kind of a well-to-do family that had a poultry farm, and she married a charming Irishman when she was a young flapper, and they made a lot of money, had a really good time, except he turned into an alcoholic and cheated a lot of people and ended up in a lot of trouble, and she was totally disheartened by all of this, and she became like a Quaker and started to give up some of her possessions. They really did very well financially, and her teaching is that anyone can earn a lot of money. That's comforting to know, isn't it? But that it doesn't really mean a lot. That might or might not be comforting, depending on how you look at things. But she decided that she was going to dedicate her life to doing good in the world and taking steps toward making peace her mission. And this was at the time post-World War II, when the Korean War was starting. There were more various wars that defined the 20th century that were on the go, and the peace movement was just starting to get started. So she moved slowly toward the idea of becoming like a full-fledged Quaker. Her younger sister, named Helen Young, rode a bike daily until she was 105, so she was very healthy too. And she continued the story of Peace Pilgrim. In the early days of Steps Toward Inner Peace, the Pilgrim wouldn't take any lifts at all from anyone. She was the first woman to walk the Appalachian Trail alone, which is quite a feat. It's a fantasy that I have. I don't know about walking away from everything forever, but she walked trails on the Pacific coast, and she crisscrossed the United States 7 times walking. Can you imagine even walking from here to Miami? I can't, but she actually did that. And then ironically, as she grew older, she did this for years and years and years. In 1981, she was in Indiana, and rarely she would take a lift because she did speaking engagements, and she just depended on people to let her sleep on their sofas or their porches, whatever, and she didn't have anywhere else to live, but she would speak at schools about the idea of peace and different churches. And in 1981, she accepted a ride to a venue in Indiana, and they got into a car crash, ironically enough, and that was how she died. She and the person that had given her a lift passed into spirit, just boom, like that. And of course, as spiritualists, we realize that that's a blessing and that she manifested her purpose. But she was 72 at that time. So it's just a very, very interesting story. And I thought that we would talk about some of the ideas that she suggested and shared in her writings today. The handout that I have has her basic 4 preparations. One is, and a lot of this will sound like Buddhism and Quaker teachings to those of you that have studied different types of spirituality. Assuming a right attitude toward life, positive, upbeat, not that we want to cheat people like the charming Irishman she fell in with did. Not anything against the Irish, that would be really hypocritical of me. But at any rate, the second one is live with good beliefs, have a positive attitude, a good outlook, good values. That is kind of nebulous because good beliefs can be a little bit different for each of us, but that was part of her belief system. Another one was find your place in the life pattern. What's your passion? What do you want to do? What appeals to you? I do readings on Zoom now with monkeypox and everything else going around rather than in person. And I had a nice young couple Zoom in to see me last night for a reading about what to do career-wise, professionally. And we talked about different ideas they had, looked at their horoscopes, psychic work with the tarot cards, and the whole thought of philosophy of Peace Pilgrim was kind of with me because I thought of Albert Einstein's uncle who advised him as a young man not to worry about anything except following his passion, what he was interested in. And so I suggested that for the young couple rather than they had 40 or 50 different businesses and things they wanted to do. And we tried to narrow it down as far as what would their passion be. So making that relevant to everybody here, the third piece of advice is your place in your life pattern. What comes easily to you? What seems meant to be? And that's what you want to focus on and what you want to look at. And then also simplifying your life to bring your outer and inner being into harmony. A lot of different problems or difficulties can distract us. And simplify means get down to what's really important. If those of you who do feng shui know, it means getting rid of the old clothes you've outworn and books you've already read, maybe. I don't know about books, maybe hold on to those. But magazines or other things that you don't really need, and focus on what is really significant or really important. And then the idea of St. Francis of Assisi was a special patron of Peace Pilgrims, and the teachings of St. Francis, as in gentleness, goodness, and care for the animals and nature. She was very in harmony with that. And it's just kind of interesting to look at the intensity of her life and the steps that she had. There's a website that's still up, and her followers, even though she died in 1981, still teach her teachings, and they have different centers. Her sister was there until quite recently doing that, and they offer a whole assortment of free publications that you can get. If you just search for Peace Pilgrim on the internet, you can find that. So here are some of the thoughts that come from her little book. Relinquishment of the self-will, assuming a good attitude. You have, as of thoughts that you have, the lower self and the higher self. The selfish self and the higher self stands ready to see you gloriously. Subordinate the lower self. That's the part that calls someone up at 3 in the morning to tell them they're no good. We've all been tempted to do that. I would admit to doing that, just admit to being tempted. And then, of course, the good things are living on a higher level, a brighter level. Giving up the thought of separateness from other people. We really all are one energy field, maybe manifested in different ways, like refracting light in a crystal. But the idea of finding harmony when you realize that The oneness is one for all, working for the work of good. What you do to one, good or not, you might do to everyone and to yourself. Attachments. Only when you've relinquished the strength of attachments can you be truly free. Material things are here to use, but not to be attached to. You can only live in harmony with your fellow beings if you have no feeling that you possess them or their things, and therefore trying to let go of what you don't need to live or for your well-being, what you might be attached to. I do think that keepsakes, memorabilia, historical items, family treasures are very important, but keeping the right attitude about them, keeping them in the right place in our lives is what I think she was talking about. Although Peace Pilgrim really did give up everything. She walked all those years with just, the bare minimum of clothing and just barely minimal possessions. And how many of you have thought about walking away from your life? Anyone thought of any more of you are raising your hands than I thought. Almost everybody here except that fixed sign guy over there who wouldn't do it. But at any rate, it's interesting how popular that idea was with our whole congregation this morning. I love it. But actually doing that, getting on the road and doing that is another thing completely. But it's just interesting to think of this story. Although others may feel sorry for you, never feel sorry for yourself. What a deadly effect on your spiritual well-being is feeling sorry for yourself. It's part of your karma, life pattern, choices, personal responsibility. Recognize all problems, no matter how difficult, as opportunities for spiritual growth. And making the most of these opportunities. For all of the things you might read and from all of the people you meet, take what is good, what is your own. Your inner teacher tells you what this is for you, and leave the rest behind. For guidance and for truth, it's much better to look to the source, to your own inner teacher, than to take all of the advice from people or books. Books and people can be inspiration, but really only you know what's good for you. That's another thought that Peace Pilgrim leaves us with. No one is truly free who is still attached to material things, places, or other people. We have to see these things when we need them and then relinquish them without regret when they've outlived their usefulness. Be able to appreciate and enjoy the places where you tarry, and then pass on. Look to see what's coming up next. That's a true wanderer. That might not work for everyone, but that was part of Peace Pilgrim's philosophy. The spiritual life is the real life. All else is illusionary and deceptive. Only with those who are attached to God can we feel truly free. Only those who live up to the highest light they have in their lives to offer can act with the highest motivations and become a power for good. Results should never be sought or desired. Know that every right thing you do, every good word you say, every positive thought you think has a good effect. Think of dropping a pebble into a bucket of water and seeing the way the ripples go out. That's a common little spiritual exercise or meditation exercise that shows how the energies that we put out, our thought forms, ripple on and on and on. All people can be peace workers. Whenever you are in harmony or in any unpeaceful situation, you can contribute to the total peace picture. Insofar as you have peace in your life, reflect it into your surroundings and into your world. That which is received from without can be compared with knowledge. It leads to believing, which is seldom strong enough to motivate action. That which comes from confirmation from within is what makes you free. Listen to that inner voice. Everybody's inner voice can come from a different place. Does your inner voice come from your heart? Does it come from your solar plexus or from the head? When you hear your voice within, kind of focus on where it comes from. And then if you can focus on that, that'll help you to attune to what your inner self is guiding you toward. I'm not an end of the worlder, but the world is going through a great catharsis right now, and we're all holding on for the ride. It's a time period that was predicted, of course, by Nostradamus, Black Elk, the book of Revelations, that this time and period of time would be one of great turning point for humanity. For years and years, I thought it was all symbolic, but you know what? It's literal, if you really look at it. And quite literally, everything's unfolding at a different pace. And we have to make the very best of these times. Our souls have chosen to be here for some reason or other. And that's just important to keep in mind. As far as the political situation, all the world governments are supposed to topple according to the predictions. God destroyed the world by water once with Noah's Ark, and it's by fire this time, so they say, and look at what's going on. So again, the teachings of inner peace, I think, can help all of us. I used to think that Noah's Ark and the story of the Ark was symbolic until archaeologists found the Ark in the Holy Land a few years ago. If you read archaeology magazines or read any of those, and you can find, I think, things about it that are published, that actually the real Ark was found, or what seems to be the remains of it, and that's chilling if you think of it, and then we read that part of the story of the Ark, and it survives. We all survive, and what helped at the end to let everybody in the Ark know they could get off? A bird. Remember the bird flying? I'm a Cancer, pay no attention. Peace Pilgrim was a Cancer too, by the way. I think that's why I was so fascinated by her. We shared the same zodiac sign. The full moon coming up, I have on my website the full article about this full moon. The website has the Sabian symbol and the other zodiac symbols related to the exact degree of the full moon, and one of them is the dove, the bird. And so, this is very significant if we look at everything happening and kind of getting prepared and ready to find the path to inner peace. So try to focus on where your voice or your inner peace comes from. How many of you have it coming from the head region? Okay, a couple of you have raised your hand. How many from the solar plexus? Do you feel it from there? How many from the heart? It's kind of divided between those three areas, but I was so pleased to see that everybody here this morning could relate to it coming from somewhere. In our spiritual development, we're often required to pull up roots many times and to close many chapters in our lives until we are no longer attached to the material things and can love everything, yet cherish them without attachment. You cannot leave a situation without spiritual injury unless you leave it lovingly. So love is a really nebulous word to try to interpret, but I interpret it as caring for something outside of ourselves for the greater good. Marie was rescuing some poor little lizards out front so that they wouldn't be crushed, and I thought, she's manifesting the path of Peace Pilgrim right before my eyes, right here, because those little lizards, I'm sure, were looking at whatever force was rescuing them with great love. So it comes in a lot of ways and just is manifested in a lot of different ways. Sometimes difficulties of the body come to show you that the body is a transient garment and that the reality is the indestructible essence which activates the body. So that's another thought that Peace Pilgrim had. After you've found inner peace, spiritual growth takes place harmoniously because you are now governed by your higher self. Your will is to do the higher will, but not to be pushed or needed by it. Overly needy people or situations that drain your energy. I like kind of a controversial phrase for that, psychic vampires. Have you ever been in a room when someone comes in and your energy just goes? Or in a situation, it's always good to donate, to give, but a situation where you feel something sucking the life out of you. She's acknowledging that phenomena and clothing it a little bit more symbolically than I did, but there's always a right way to do something. And suffering, she really equates to immaturity. We're not here to suffer. And there would be no problems. We wouldn't try to do the impossible. Anything that is excessively involving suffering of any type, Peace Pilgrim says, walk away from. Of course, trust in the law of love. And since the universal operates in accordance with that law, how could you trust anything else? For light, she says to go directly to the source of light, not to any of its reflections. She makes it possible for the light to come to her by living up to her highest ideals. We think of lighting a candle in the darkness or following the light, the dawn of a new day. She's speaking symbolically there. Never think of any right effort as being fruitless. All right effort bears good fruit, whether we see the results or not. So just concentrate on thinking and living and acting for peace. Inspire others to do likewise, and leave the results in the hands of the divine. You can't change anyone except yourself, and after you've become an example, you might then be able to inspire others to change themselves. Has anyone tried to get an alcoholic or drug addict to stop eating or drinking pills or drugs? Did you get very far? Anyone get very far? No, I never have either. That seems to come my way a lot for some reason. And that's all I could think of when I was studying this. You know, what a waste of time and effort to try to get someone to quit drinking until they're good and ready. You know, all you can do is drink your cream soda and try to inspire them, I guess. So there's, to achieve the good, you have to, in your own work, have a good effect. Peace Pilgrim had correspondents from all over the world. She was really very famous in her time, from 1953 to 1981, and her work still goes on. And these are some of the ideas from her correspondence that I thought you might be curious about and that might be interesting. Do you work for a living? Someone asked her, you know, which is interesting. Oh, I work for a living. I hear that phrase all the time as a psychic counselor. People will say they want spiritual guidance, and then they'll come in and say, am I going to have any money and meet anybody? Those are important questions, so I'm not demeaning them, but it's just kind of interesting. So she got that same question, and she says, I work for my living in an unusual way. I gave up what I can through my thoughts and words and deeds to those whose lives I touch and to humanity. In return, I accept what people want to give, but I don't ask. They're blessed by their giving and are blessed by giving. She's talking about food and about lodging. In her larger biography, she actually was just given meals. And she said she very seldom went hungry or a day without a meal, and very seldom without anywhere to sleep, which is quite wonderful. If you think about it, it was just her sheer presence or being that allowed this to manifest. I don't know if all of us could do that. I think I'd be afraid to try myself, but at least it gives you a thought about the power of manifestation on this eve of the 8/8, which will be tomorrow. You know, how she manifested this, and what would you like to manifest in your own life along the same ways? Why don't you accept money? The next question. Because I talk about spiritual truths, and spiritual truths should never be sold. Those who sell it injure themselves spiritually. The money that comes in the mail without being solicited, I use for printing and postage. Those who attempt to buy spiritual truth are trying to get it before they are ready. In this wonderfully ordered universe, when they are ready, it will be given. Well, we all need X amount of money to survive. It represents energy. So I think you want to look at it being your attitude toward money or toward finances, but she just had a very eclectic view there of that important question. Don't you get lonely or discouraged or tired? Well, walking across the desert, up and down, walking through the night sometimes, and walking day after day, because she didn't stay anywhere very long. You'd think she might get lonely or tired. She didn't ever remarry after that first marriage, and from what I could see about her life, didn't have a close relationship. Her attitude, her answer to that question was no. When you live in constant communication with the divine, you can't be lonely. When you perceive the working of wonderful plans and know that all good effort bears fruit, you cannot be discouraged. When you have found inner peace, you are in contact with the source of universal energy, and you cannot be tired. What can retirement mean to a person? Retirement should mean not a cessation of activity, but a change of activity for a more complete giving of your life to service. I should therefore be the most wonderful time in your life, or it should therefore be the most wonderful time in your life, the time when you're happily and meaningfully busy. I haven't retired, but friends that I have that have retired say they didn't know how they ever had time to work. They're so busy. Anyone feel that way? Anyone want to admit to it? Someone did. Okay, I won't say who raised his or her hand just then. Okay, but that's comforting to know. What are the good things, and how do I fill my life with good things? Pilgrim responds to that question with, good things are those that are of benefit to you and others. When I'm doing counseling with relationships, a lot of abused and battered women mostly, but men sometimes come for readings, and I'll ask how this relationship is affecting their life, and that's the answer as to whether to continue it or not, whether it's a good idea. So you may get some inspiration from the outside, but in the final analysis, ask what you want to fill your life with. Then you can take a schedule of what the good life should be like. And is this relationship or situation or job doing that for you? There's something that can always be beneficial, she believes, and that's walking or exercise. Well, that's someone who walked the Appalachian Trail and who is related to a 105-year-old bicyclist. So it's a little extreme, but I do think that there's a lot of truth in that idea of the exercise. And when confronted with a problem, what can I do about it intellectually, is the question asked of Peace Pilgrim. And she says, if it's a health problem, ask yourself, have I abandoned my body? If it's a psychological problem, ask yourself, have I been living as a loving, divine being, God-centered? If it's a financial problem, ask yourself, have I been living within my means? What you do in the present creates the future. To use the present to create a wonderful future constantly, your thoughts are creating your inner conditions and helping you to create the conditions around you. So keep your thoughts on the positive side. Think about the best that could happen. Think about the good things you want to have happen. It's very simple and it's kind of repetitive, but I think the advice works. The power of the mind is just incredible. Most of us, if we're lucky, can use about 2 or 3% of our brain power. Someone like Elon Musk or Einstein might use 5%. If you can use just a little bit more of your visualization, energy, and thought, and you will be able to, with these exercises, it can, as Emerald says, kick you up a notch. And that's kind of what I got from Peace Pilgrim's teachings. Will there always be pain in one's becoming more beautiful? Well, that's a really deep question, isn't there? There is no coming to consciousness without pain. I don't like that phrase. You come across it a lot in metaphysical teachings, but she responded to that. There will be pain in your spiritual growth until you do the higher will and no longer need to be pushed into it. When you are out of harmony with the divine will, problems come, and their purpose is to put you in harmony with that will, and to avoid the problems, keep you focused on the highest and the best. Will I ever come to a state of feeling at rest? When you have found inner peace, you have no more need to feel to become rested. You'll constantly be, and you'll keep on growing and growing beauteously. She lived very, very well and lived really kind of a rough life. So there must be some truth and some wisdom into the teachings, even though they sound kind of esoteric and idealistic. So maybe that's enough, and maybe we should think about the full moon coming up on Thursday, August 11th, a little bit. To conclude, we have a few minutes left. I'd like to mention this important full moon coming up. It's the 4th supermoon, which means it's kind of turned up to high volume. It'll be especially beautiful. It's at 9:36 p.m., this Eastern Daylight Time Zone, on August 11th, when it's going to be at its greatest perigee. Traditional names for this full moon include the wart, W-O-R-T, or plant moon. Wart is an Old English word for plant. The grain moon, barley moon, green corn moon, the sturgeon moon, and the fruit moon. In degrees of the zodiac symbolized, this full moon becomes the great tortoise. Watch for turtles, everybody. Solitary, harmless, and philosophical are the spiritual words for turtles. And the Sabian symbol was the source that used this degree of the zodiac of this full moon, which is 19 degrees Aquarius, 21 minutes, as being a big white dove as a message bearer. Think of the survival after the ark. And I think it's survival after this time when so much is being destroyed by fire in different ways. Anyone an Aquarian in here? I know there's at least one back there. Any Aquarians, you'll particularly be feeling this full moon. This is the only full moon in your birth sign all year, so you want to make the most of it. It's conjoining the planet Saturn in Aquarius, and this brings in a serious mood. Concerns about technology and human interests prevail. Venus will enter Leo at 2:30 p.m. on the day of the full moon. Any Leos, Aries, or Sagittarius here, you're starting a good 3-week cycle. The Venus transit through Leo affects all of you fire sign people in a warm and creative way. You might enjoy caring for loved ones, getting involved with theater, sports, games, or best of all, vacation time. Venus is in Leo until September 5th. And then after that, you Virgos will start a good cycle because Venus will be entering Virgo. This full moon has Neptune in Pisces opposing Mercury, and this is the aspect of the storyteller. There's a lot of chicanery, distortion, and illusion. We also have a lot of retrograde planets right now. Most people know about retrograde Mercury. Retrograde Mercury and the full moon are very famous transits. How many of you have heard of retrograde Mercury here? I think almost everybody. How many of you have heard of retrograde Neptune? Nobody. Oh, a few of you have. You astrologers back there, forgive me. Forgot we have a couple scholars back there. Anyway, the retrograde planets mean that a lot of them, they're interpreted at different ways, but they're very good for looking at your repeating patterns. Most of September, Mercury will be retrograde, by the way. And so you want to think of what is good from the past. If you keep repeating the same things, good or not, you'll get what you always have gotten. Look to the past to understand the future and the present as you're sort of studying the retrogrades and thinking about the time period. I enjoyed spending Sunday morning with you, and thank you so much for attending the Lyceum today. church service starts at 10:30, so there's a little tiny break, I think. Hey John, how are you doing?
Yes, we got the full moon coming up on the 8th of August.
11th of August. The Lion's Gate is the 8th, that's tomorrow. Yeah.
Because the moon has been crazy the last couple of days, I've noticed.
Oh, it's really affecting everyone. I have a little write-up about it. This is my background sheet, but it's up online if you want to read the aspects and more details about